Hi, I'm Jim Fielding, and I'm on the Culture Matters podcast.
And yes, Jim, you are on the Culture Matters podcast. Welcome. Nice to have you
Thank
here.
you.
All
Thank you
right.
so much for having me.
With pleasure, with great pleasure. All right. So, where do we start this conversation? Let's see. First, I know a little bit about you because I've read a little bit about you. I prepared a little bit about this for this conversation as well.
Hmm.
But the audience has no clue, potentially no clue, although you're
Yes.
world famous. So do us a favor, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, maybe a little
Hmm.
bit about it, but your history, and what is your so-called cultural frame of reference. And with a cultural frame of reference, I don't mean two weeks in Cancun, because 2 weeks in Cancun
Yes.
doesn't give you a lot of cultural framework. Yeah,
At an all inclusive resort, right?
absolutely. I've
Yes.
done it. It was
Yeah.
wonderful, but it's not for me.
Yes.
Anyways, okay, over to you.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I grew up in the middle of the United States, Toledo, Ohio, actually, a very kind of the industrial Midwest, as it's known. My dad was a fireman. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I think from a very early age, I knew that my life was going to be beyond Toledo, Ohio, even though it was a great place to grow up. My parents instilled in me that there was greener pastures and kind of wider horizons outside. And really my cultural and kind of global awareness started in when I was a junior in high school. I did a 3-week study trip to Germany with my German teacher. I studied German in school since like eighth grade. And even though that was an organized study trip, that started to open up my mind and open up my horizons. And I went to school at Indiana University. I majored in political science. And a huge part of my studies in political science was actually European economic political systems.
Mhm.
And that included my junior year abroad at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. And so I think I always knew I thought I was going to be an international lawyer, honestly, Chris. I was going to go to law school. I'm old enough, I'll be aging myself for your audience. Like it was before the EU, before the common currency. And I actually did a lot of research on forming the common currency and what that was going to be like and what the pros and cons of that were. So I ended up not going to law school. I ended up building a career in retail and media. But ironically, especially when I was president of Disney stores around the world. So we built Disney stores in 14 different countries. I was CEO of Claire stores, the girls' jewelry and accessory stores. We had stores in 41 countries.
Mhm.
I always had, as I got into more senior roles, I always had global purview and global responsibility. And so I always, as we were talking about before we came on, yes, I'm proud to be American. And yes, I'm very American and Midwestern in my roots, but I've always tried to move through life as a global citizen and with global eyes and with global awareness. Um, and worked hard not to be bluntly too American.
Mhm.
And that was work over the years for sure.
Okay, so we've established a few things here. You're over 24.
Yes.
That's the
Thank you.
introduction of the
Yes,
euro.
I'm 25. No, yeah,
You're
exactly.
25.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mentally,
yeah.
that's another question that
Yeah, no,
I
yeah,
ask myself the
totally.
question as well.
No, I will be
And
60. I'll be 60 in April.
okay, all right. So I'm slightly ahead of you. But that's not the conversation. That's not I'm sorry. And you are a so-called enlightened American. You've been
Hmm.
outside of the country, which doesn't happen to every American,
Totally.
which is not necessary either, given the size of the country and the diversity of the country, evidently as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, there's huge differences within our own borders,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Between and I grew up in the Midwest. I lived 25 years in California. Now I live in Atlanta, the
Hmm.
South.
Hmm.
Um, each region very different.
I have a really maybe a weird question.
Sure.
You have your name is Jim Fielding, right? That is your name.
Hmm.
Your website, however, is hjimfielding.com. Where did the H come
Hi.
from?
No, it's hi. Hi.
Okay.
Hijimfielding.com.
Hi, Jim. Okay, I'm sorry. I got
It's
it. Okay.
I'll tell you where it came from. Somebody else owns jimfielding.com, and he
Uh-huh.
is a British artist,
Uh-huh.
illustrator. I actually like his art. And when I was when I was launching professional services and going into speaking and coaching, I was like, I can't own my own name. What can I own? And I could own High Jim Fielding. And I thought it was kind of friendly and approachable. It's
Okay.
Hi Jim
I
Fielding.
just
Yeah.
missed the I. It's my
Yeah,
my
yeah. No, no,
dyslexic.
it's easy. It's easy to see. It's hijimfielding.com. I
Yeah.
mean, easy to
No,
miss.
obvious. Okay, so at least we know your website. HI
Yeah.
Jim Fielding. Hi, Jim Fielding.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
all right, let's move to your. I think this is your topic. All pride, no ego. Correct?
That's the name of my book. That was my
That's
first book that
yeah.
came
That's
out.
the
Yep.
name of your book, indeed.
Yep.
So, all pride, no ego. Explain, please.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a leadership and life lesson book. And honestly, the way it's organized around 10 leadership slash life lessons that basically at the time I was 56 when I wrote the book.
Yeah.
My editor that I worked with basically gave me the permission. She said, write the book that 25, 26-year-old Jim wish he would have had more at the beginning of his career. So
Hmm.
it's almost like writing a guidebook to myself, like
Hmm.
things that I learned later in life that I wish I had learned earlier in life. So, for example, the first life lesson, lesson number one, is control the controllable, but leave space for the possible.
Say that again,
Um,
please. Just repeat that.
control the controllable, but leave space for the possible. So that's life lesson one. The last lesson, lesson 10, is authentic kindness is more important than being right or being first. So it really, what's been great, the reception to the book has been really nice around the world. It hit the bestseller list here in the US, and it really changed my entire life these last 18 months. It came out in August of 2023,
Hmm.
and it has enabled me to have a speaking career. It's enabled me to, I'm writing more books now.
Hmm.
And more importantly, I went back to school this year in 2024 for 6 months and got certified to be an executive coach. And so
Okay.
that's really where I'm spending my life now, is coaching, speaking, and writing. And I've been able to go around the country. I've done events in the UK. I've done some virtual events in Germany and in Spain. I've been able to really spread the message. And the underlying message of All Pride, No Ego is about embracing your personal authenticity. And I'm encouraging people to lead, be authentic leaders, which in my definition is create safe spaces for all people to bring their true authentic stories to the workspace.
All people for all from all kind of background, religion,
100%.
whatever the
Religion,
yeah,
age,
sexual
gender,
preference and stuff
sexual
like that. Yeah,
preference,
yeah.
gender, socioeconomic class, neurodivergence, people with different physical abilities. It's really about, and I've been blessed because the companies I've worked for, I've seen the business case for leading with authenticity and managing diverse workforces.
Okay, so that is a good segue into um, a couple of things. What I hear, but it's an interpretation for what you say, is
Sure.
that it sounds kind of soft. It's a soft
Mm-hmm.
approach in I guess a dominant masculine society, the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't like the word masculine because it talks about gender, and that's not
Yeah.
that has never been the intention. So I prefer to use the more
Yes.
goal-oriented United States. Does that
Yes.
land in the US, and does it land better in, say, softer or more
Mm.
process-oriented cultures like, say, Sweden or the Netherlands or even Germany for that matter?
I think it's a great point. I mean, I think Soft skills, hard skills, definitely people talk about that, right? People talk about IQ versus EQ, right?
Hmm.
Emotional intelligence versus, IQ intelligence. Uh, I think authentic leadership and the way that I lead and the way I encourage people to lead, to be fair, I think it works in all industries. I think it can work in all cultures. I do think it lands easier, to use your word, in more creative industries. Like I was in retail and media and storytelling, to your point. I think it lands in more advanced cultures, Scandinavia, you know, Holland, Amsterdam, where you are,
Hmm.
where that the conversation has been going on for years. A lot of times, it's interesting. We, having just gone through the election here, like we haven't elected a female president of the United States. We're one of the last developed countries that has not had a female leader.
Yeah.
So it now I would say there's still industries, banking, investment banking, that are probably more harder, not as much about the soft side, more tactical, more
Go
fact
get,
based, goal
and
oriented,
right.
ambitious, driven. But the thing is, listen, I worked for Disney for 12 years. I worked for DreamWorks. I worked for Fox. I had goals to meet. I'm as goal oriented and ambitious and driven as any other manager. I just have always felt that how you achieve the goal is as important as achieving the goal itself. So I was always a leader and manager, and luckily worked for people that enabled me to be like this. That I felt if I worked with my people and built a diverse team of interesting individuals with diverse backgrounds and diverse viewpoints, we'd actually create better results for our company. If you think of a company like Disney,
Hmm.
that consumer base is very diverse around the world, right? And so
Oh
I
yeah.
loved managing a team that had people from China, that had people from Japan, that had people from Europe, that had people from South America, because I firmly believe that two heads are better than one, and good ideas come out of that mix. And so I was always trying to create environments where people felt, again, safe, but also encouraged to share their viewpoints. I did not want a bunch of robots just executing, basically.
Right. Could that then be, I mean, your approach, um, uh, all pride, no ego, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
could that be
yes.
an approach that works across cultures, or do you see that different cultures find it more difficult to deal with this, and other cultures pick it up? Yes,
Mm,
this is what I like. This is how I want to be managed.
yeah, I mean, I listen, in my personal experience, it did work, but it does not mean that it was exactly the same in each country or in each region.
Mhm.
I think most human beings understand ego and pride, right? And we
Yeah.
have we have pride. I mean, people have pride. What I talk a lot about in the book and a lot about in my coaching and my speaking is I also have ego, by the way. It doesn't mean I don't ever
Of
have
course,
ego, but
of course.
it's about learning how to control the ego and learning how to not let the ego drive all of the decision making, right?
Right.
But it's also about, listen, I'm an LGBTQ, I'm a member of the queer community. I was a gay man leading in some of these world's largest multinationals. It was
Hmm.
also about me being comfortable and being prideful in myself, and that I could move through this world and be successful and be treated fairly and be treated equitably.
Sure.
Um, and that's really the environment that I want to create for people. And that's when I keep going back to safe workspaces, it's physically and psychologically safe
Of
workspaces where
course.
people feel
Yeah.
free.
Of course. The word ego in your book, does that have any link with Sigmund Freud?
I mean, it does. I mean, I don't really listen. I'm not a psychoanalyst. I'm not a therapist. So I don't really go in. It's interesting because in coaching, we did a lot of work on the id and the ego and the super ego. We did a lot of work on brain-based coaching. But yes, I mean, I would say Freud is probably the most famous in talking about the different, the id and the super ego and the
Yeah.
ego. Um, I think authentic leadership goes back centuries. If you go back and look at Plato and Socrates
Hmm.
and Kierkegaard, and I mean existentialism. I mean, there is a we could do a whole separate podcast on the historic precedents of authenticity and personal authenticity and owning your story. I mean, there's a lot. Nitschke talked about it. I mean, there's a lot in philosophy and early psychology
Hmm.
um, about being able to embrace your truth, being able to embrace your story.
Yeah. Okay, good point. It's the I got two questions in one. I'm not sure really where to
Sure,
start, but
sure.
I'll just start with the one that I wrote down. You say in I got this from your LinkedIn profile, I think, or from your website. You say you don't
Right.
want to work in corporate America anymore. Any reason for that? Any particular reason, or just in general? It's just something you've done and done with?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm at a point, and I love that we're talking about storytelling. I really look at my life in chapters, right? And in like chapters of a book. And I
Yeah.
feel um I look at birthdays, particularly the birthdays that end in zeros and fives, as like really kind of pivotal times in your life. Like, of course, I celebrate every birthday, but the in-betweens aren't as big. And I really stepped back the last year and a half and said, how do I really want to spend 60 to 70? How do I really want to spend even 60 to 65? And I feel that I'm at the point where would I go back to corporate? I never say never because I've learned the rule. But right now, how I want to spend my time is helping others
Hmm.
achieve their goals and helping others achieve their growth mindset. And I love my corporate experience and I'm grateful for every leader and manager that I worked for and every leader and manager that worked for me because I learned from each circumstance.
Hmm.
But I feel that it's time for me to spend my time doing this. And it literally goes back to that first learning, control the controllable, but leave space for the possible. Because this is the first time in my life, honestly, Chris, and it really only started in July or August of 2024,
Hmm.
where I wake up in the morning and I'm not working for anybody else. I'm working for my clients.
Yeah.
I'm working for my coaching clients, my speaking clients. Um, I have been getting a paycheck. I said this to a lot of my friends. A lot of your listeners will understand. I went to work when I was 13. Like I had a part-time job when I
Hmm.
was 13. My parents were very blue collar Midwestern and literally got my last quote corporate paycheck in July of 2024. So that was literally 46 years of paychecks, right?
Hmm.
And now I'm completely a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, whatever you want to call me. I mean, I'm completely, it's my brand, it's my storytelling, it's my work now. And so for me, the reason I don't want to do corporate anymore is I know how involved I get when I have a corporate job and I dive in and I give all of myself. And I really want to hold space for this community that I'm building and this story and platform that I'm building.
Okay. Now
So
you
it's
have
not that I'm
you.
anti-corporate, but it's just I
Yeah,
know how I
sure.
am.
Now, Jim, you have some experience outside of the US in terms of
Yes.
you've been to other countries in the world. Been not, I mean, online is different than actually going there, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
and smell the air and stuff like that. Could you work for say a non-American corporate organization?
Yeah, I really do think I would listen. I mean, I love that you're in Amsterdam. Like I think Holland is a really interesting, the Netherlands is a really interesting country and culture. I love Scandinavia. I went to school in Denmark for an
Mhm.
entire year and spent a lot of time in Denmark and Sweden and Finland and Norway. Um, I absolutely think I could. It's funny. One of the companies that I spent a lot of time with, particularly at DreamWorks, is IKEA. And I spent a lot of time in their culture and, I was selling to them, but selling to them meant going to their offices for 1 or 2 weeks and
Mhm.
working together and planning together. So yeah, I do think I could. I think I absolutely could live overseas again. I have an elderly mother who is struggling with dementia, and so that kind of
Mhm.
holds me in the States right now because I want to
Okay,
be close to her.
of course.
But I can absolutely see myself living overseas. And it's ironic because the program that I was in Denmark in 1986, my niece just completed the same program
All
this
right.
year. And so I went and spent 2 weeks living in Denmark again, like in an Airbnb while she was there, because it was amazing to experience that as an uncle and watch. She literally was the same thing. I went when I was 20, turned 21. She did the exact same thing. It was fun to watch her
Mhm.
do that. So again, I like to think of myself as a global citizen. Yes, I think I could, for sure.
It, it's okay. This is part of my second part of my
Sure.
question or the thing really. I mean, we you mentioned already the elections in the President-elect Donald Trump.
Yeah.
By the way, for the
Yes.
audience, we are recording this on the 23rd of December, 2024. Um, he is very much anti-woke, right?
Oh
So,
yeah.
and you already said you move around in the LGBTQ plus whatever
Hmm.
alphabet comes more.
Totally.
There's an AI there as well, I think.
IA plus. Yes.
Yeah, and it's
Yep.
not artificial intelligence, I think.
No, no, no.
No, not in this case. Is this, and this seems to be, I don't know. I am Dutch. I live partly in Paris, partly in Colombia,
Mm,
where I am right now at this moment.
yeah.
And so I see a general, I don't know, and it's a very subjective view. People are sort of done with the whole woke thing, at least in the circles that I
Hmm.
move around in. What is your opinion around that? Is the US leading in this one, or is this something that you see around other countries as well?
Well, I mean, I'm seeing it in other countries too. I mean, we're seeing it in the UK, we're seeing it in Germany, we're seeing it in Italy. You can see it in the elections,
Yeah.
France. Um, it saddens me, honestly, Chris, because I think this anti wokeness, like, I think somehow DEI, diversity, belonging, and inclusion, it has suddenly become the narrative has been really co-opted by in many countries including the US the right side of the political spectrum and in many
Mm,
cases the far right side,
yeah.
and it's become very much about the LGBTQ community and in many cases about the T in LGBTQ, which is not what DEI and belonging and inclusion was about. I mean, DEI belonging and inclusion was a much bigger umbrella that got into physical abilities and neurodivergence and female and people of color. And I mean, it was not just LGBTQ plus. And so I feel yes, there's an anti-woke movement for sure. And you see companies, particularly in the US, rolling back their quote policies and their departments and their support for DEI. And, for me, living in this world, I feel like then I have to double my efforts and get back to sharing a different narrative, again, talking about the competitive advantage and the success
Yeah.
of managing diversity and managing belonging and inclusion, and also getting back to fact base. It's very hard in the face of the recent election. But if you look at the demographics of the United States that are projected for 2030, I mean, we are a more diverse society today than we were 20 years ago, just by the
Hmm.
nature of immigration and by the nature of marriage and the nature of the younger generation and how they're growing up. And so I think there's a huge movement
Hmm.
that would love to take it back, frankly, to the 1950s and 1960s.
Yeah.
And that's just not possible. I mean, the genie is out of the bottle, as I say. And as a queer man of privilege of a certain age, I have many friends who I respect in my queer family who are kind of done and are like moving or, relocating or going to spend part of their year outside of the United States. And I've had numerous conversations about we can stay and address this issue and work in a democracy because this is a democracy, or we
Hmm.
can leave. It's like fight or flight.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have to be part of the not so silent minority. And I just, for your non-American listeners, I know you have a lot of them. When you look at the popular vote, the other candidate, the candidate I voted for, I'm not ashamed to say, won
Mm.
almost 80 million votes, and Donald Trump did not get to 50%. How Donald Trump won the election was through the Electoral College, which is, again, we could do a whole separate
Yeah. Okay.
speech or
That,
podcast.
yeah.
But there's a lot of like-minded people in the United States that did not vote for Donald Trump. We
Mm.
can't just sit silent for the next 4 years.
Mm.
We can't.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock as well. I just want to.
Sure, sure.
No, no,
Yeah.
but it's still the question in your experience, do you know about a country that's more it's a value judgment. I don't know how else to phrase it.
Yeah.
Is more ahead of this say the
Oh,
LGBTQ and etc. is more ahead, and we don't need to emphasize on that so much anymore
for
because it
sure.
becomes
I would
natural.
I would put yeah, I would put all the Scandinavian countries, like, I mean, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, I put them ahead of the United States in this space. Um, it's interesting. I mean, I think there's certain places in Latin America. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I don't think I have like a chart that shows, but I would just say based on because the other thing is it's LGBTQ social justice, LGBTQ plus rights are also very closely tied to women's rights
Hmm.
and women's justice. And so I look often at countries who are better at issues of gender parity and gender pay equity and things like that. And there are definitely countries that are ahead of the United States in that, because I think that sometimes can be seen as a leading indicator
Yeah,
for support for our community.
yeah, good point. Still a lot to cover apparently in the
Yeah.
future. Let's see what the coming 4 years
Yeah,
is gonna
it's
bring.
listen, we have to be ready for anything is
Yeah,
my thought. I mean, we've done it before. I mean, we lived through 4 years of it between 2016 and 2020. You know, the fear of all of us is that it's going to be worse this time than last time. So
yeah.
we'll see.
We'll
We'll
see
see.
indeed. Same here. Same sentiment, by the way. So, okay,
Yeah.
last two questions, Jim, if I may.
Sure.
Um, can you give us three tips from your experience globally and corporate as well to become more culturally competent?
1,000%. I mean, the first one I would say is to be a lifelong learner and stay constantly curious, right? I mean, I think the world is constantly changing. Technology, consumer, everything's changing. And
Mhm.
so I I am basically just a lifelong student, and I think you should be a lifelong global student. The
Okay.
second
Yeah.
tip that I give people a lot of times is to in whether you're a digital reader or a physical reader, subscribe to international publications, especially for Americans, right? Like
Mhm.
read foreign newspapers, read The Economist, read foreign magazines, because if you tend to keep yourself in an echo chamber and only read and only listen to American journalists, you're not always getting the full
Mhm.
story. And I think the underlying of all those is something you and I talked about, and that is keep an open mind. I mean, do not be closed-minded. And one of the things that I say is I just never want to be done, right? I don't want to say, oh, I know everything I'm supposed to know and my brain is done. I constantly am surprised by things that are happening around the world. And so, you know, there's interesting things going on in Canadian politics right now, for example. Most
Yeah.
Americans wouldn't study that. I'm actually watching very closely what's going on in the Canadian politics and what's going on with the prime minister, because that has a huge impact on the United States. I mean, they are our major trading partner. They're obviously our
Mhm.
border partner to the north. And I think that's your job as a global citizen, is to be aware of how elections around the world impact you, the same way that people are very aware how the president of the United States impacts their country,
Yeah.
right? So
True. Was that your third one included already, or do you have a third
open
one?
mind. Yeah, no, that third one is just live with an open mind.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that. Um,
Sure.
last thing, how can people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you?
For sure. I mean, the easiest way is the website, hijimfielding.com. And yes, it is me. There's a contact button there, and that's me. LinkedIn, Jim Fielding on LinkedIn. Another easy way. It's not a robot. It's not an AI bot. That's me answering. That's me posting. I post literally almost every day on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that comes out every 2 weeks that you can subscribe to.
Okay.
I love being in community with people, and I every day I see a new follower come on or a new connection come on, and I reach out to them and thank them for connecting and following. And I, again, try to learn something new from each of them.
All right, Jim. Thank you so much for your
Thank
enlightening
you.
spirit and enthusiasm.
Of
And
course.
I'm pretty sure we'll bump into each other in the future.
For sure.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Take care.